Morning. Okay, so imagine the scene. It's a Monday morning. I'm at school, not this week, but soon. I'm on my way to the staff room to check my pigeonhole, one of the first trips of the day, every day. And I bump into a colleague who says, "Hey, how are you?" So I say, "Yeah, good, thanks. You? How was your weekend?" And they say, "Yeah, pretty good. Didn't get up to much. How about you?" And I'll say something like, "Yeah, lots of badminton, pretty standard weekend for me. Church was good yesterday." And then they'll say something like, "Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm not really religious." Has anyone ever said that to you? I'm not really religious. And I'm left wondering how to respond to that, because when someone says, "Oh, I'm not really religious," I think the inferred statement is, "Oh, you are religious." And I'm not sure I'm entirely okay with that. Am I a Christian? Yes. Is Christianity a religion? Yes. So therefore, am I religious? Well, yes, technically I am. But actually, my concern is that when someone says, "Are you religious?" there are way too many kind of connotations and preconceptions around that word that don't really line up with what I'd want to say about my religion. I think the idea of religious has become tied up with being pretty boring, basically, following rules that tell you all about what you shouldn't and mustn't do, and generally ensuring you're having as little fun as possible, I think. I think there's something around that. Perhaps it also includes a bit of behaving like you're better than other people. Maybe it includes a bit of hypocrisy. And so I'm reluctant to just go along with the idea that I'm religious, because those ideas feel so far away from life-giving hope that I think my religion is about. Lots of you will know that I'm a big fan of the Alpha course. In session 4, on one of the videos, they are asking people on the street about faith. And one of the guys says, "Well, I don't think faith has anything to do with religion." And that statement is often such a great starting point for a discussion in the Alpha group about what we mean by those words, faith and religion. Personally, I prefer to talk about having faith rather than being religious. Not because religious is wrong, but because I do want to be clear about what I mean and what I don't mean, especially. I don't mean I have to go to church every Sunday. I mean, I choose to go to church most Sundays because I love to gather with others in worship. Singing with others lifts something in my soul in a way that nothing else does. And at church, I get to share life with people who encourage me and support me and challenge me. I don't mean I have to pray and read the Bible every day. But I do mean I try to pray and read the Bible often. I'm not always very good at it, but I want to, because in doing those things, I find strength and guidance for my life and hope. I don't mean I'm not allowed to drink or smoke or take drugs or swear or whatever else you want to add to that list. But I do mean I try to honor God with my words and my actions every day, and that influences the choices I make about those things. And I certainly don't mean I'm a Christian, so I'm a better person than you are. I mean, I've acknowledged a huge amount of brokenness and need for help in my life. And so I choose to place my trust in God, which gives me hope. And I pray that he will keep changing me and transforming me into who he has made me to be. And I could go on with a list of things I don't mean and what I do mean. But I suppose the key thing that I want to bring into the conversation is that for me, religion is much more about relationship with God than rules. It's about that relationship with God that's made possible by Jesus' death and resurrection, so that I can know real and abundant life now in all its fullness. It is about knowing that I am loved and known by the creator of the universe, and his love for me is a model for how I should love others. It's out of the love and life that I've received that I try to live my life in a way that honors him. Now, we've read 3 passages this morning, and this idea of religion was the one that just stood out for me when I read them over the last week. I want us to have a look at what we can learn from those, but the approach I've taken this morning is just to pick out kind of a couple of highlights from each one rather than get deeper into it. So I'd really encourage you to go away this week and read them more, see what else you get out of it. This certainly won't be everything there is. Let's start in Mark, which I think was one we just had from Caroline. Thank you. So in this passage, we see the Pharisees, the teacher of the law, coming to Jesus to challenge him on why his disciples aren't following all the traditions for washing and eating. Pharisees are known for their focus on rules and traditions and religiousness. I think they felt they had a clear idea of what it meant to be religious. And throughout the Gospels, we see their focus on following the laws, keeping the commands, but we also see Jesus challenging them on that a lot, challenging their motives. And here in this passage that Caroline read for us, Jesus quotes Isaiah. He says, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules." And then he goes on to say, "You've let go of the commands of God and are holding on to human traditions." The Pharisees have perhaps started with good intentions, but somewhere along the way, they've lost sight of God's purpose. They've lost sight of the intentions behind the law. They've just been left with human rules. Maybe with the focus of looking good or appearing righteous, or just rules because there are rules to follow and it makes us feel like we're doing stuff right if we're following the rules. But I think in there are some ideas, some challenges for us while we're considering that idea of religious. You know, we have come to church this morning, we have sung worship together, we've honoured God with our lips. Where are our hearts this morning? Are we worshipping God with our hearts as well as with our lips this morning? How might we have let go of the commands of God and just be holding on to human traditions? Where might we just be going through the motions with our hearts no longer really in it? Where might we be like the Pharisees, who were more focused on the traditions than the purposes behind them? Maybe we give financially to the church, but we resent it and wish we were spending it on something else. Maybe we're praying, but really we're just rattling off some stuff that we always say to get it done for the day. Maybe we come to church, but then we just like to moan about all the ways it wasn't like how we'd have liked it to be. You know, do our actions throughout the week back up what we say here on a Sunday? I think we should be open to being challenged on some of that stuff. In the Deuteronomy reading, it said, "Now Israel, hear the decrees and laws I'm about to teach you. Follow them so that you may live. Do not add to what I command you and do not subtract from it, but keep the commands of the Lord your God that I give you." It goes on to say, "Observe them carefully, for this will show your wisdom and understanding to the nations, who will hear about all these decrees and say, 'Surely this is a great nation who is wise and understanding.'" So why should we follow God's commands? Verse 1 says, "Follow them so that you may live, so that you may go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you." Verse 6 says, "Observe them carefully, for this will show your wisdom and understanding to the nations." You see, when we follow God's commands for us, it's not this idea we mentioned earlier about following rules because there are rules. When we follow God's commands, we receive life. We can receive and take hold of God's promises for our life. We can thrive and flourish. And also in doing that, we shine as a witness to those around us. I think those sound like great reasons to follow God's commands for my life. And Moses is really clear there that the law of the Lord is perfect as it is. Israel needs to hear and follow, not adding or subtracting anything. What might we be adding or subtracting to God's commands for us? You know, at its core, Jesus' teaching says, love the Lord your God and love your neighbour as yourself. You know, how are we doing with that? What have we added to that? Are we getting caught up in additional rules that we feel we have to follow? Or are we neglecting some of that command to love? Maybe this week it will be good to remind ourselves of what God's call for us really is, what he really asks of us. and examine whether we're adding or subtracting anything at all. Before we look at the final passage, I also just want to pick up on verse 7, because when I read it this week, I loved it. I mentioned earlier that when I talk about faith, I like the idea of relationship with God being a key part of that. And verse 7 says, "What other nation is so great as to have their gods near them, the way the Lord our God is near to us when we pray to him?" What other nation is so great as to have their gods near to them, the way the Lord our God is near to us when we pray to him? It's just good, isn't it? Nothing and no one else that people might worship compares to God and the way that he draws near to us. And when we're thinking about the idea of how we live our life, what a great reminder that we're not alone. God is near to us. He is with us. And so when we're considering what it looks like to follow God's commands, let's remember this morning that we're not going out to do that in our own strength. We're not going out alone to do that. So the third passage that we heard this morning was in James, which said, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, they will be blessed in what they do." I think that sounds like a contradiction to some people. The law that gives freedom and blessing. You know, that is, again, so different from the concept of religion being all about things you can't do or shouldn't do or mustn't do. When someone says to me, "Are you religious?" I want to do whatever I can to convey the freedom and blessing that comes in religion. Verse 27 of that passage in James said, "Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress." The Message says, anyone who sets himself up as religious by talking a good game is self-deceived. That kind of religion is hot air and only hot air. Real religion, the kind that passes muster before God the Father, is this: reach out to the homeless and loveless in their plight. It's just so clear to me that religion is not about rules. It's not about talking a good game. As people who follow Jesus, we are called to reach out to others, to be a blessing, to show love. We are called to be people who bring light and life into the places that God has placed us and to the people who he's put around us. So if I go back to that conversation by the staff room at school, or any other situation where the word religious is maybe thrown into your conversation, a 2-minute "how are you" chat might not be the moment to bring up everything that I've just said this morning. But I think it's really good for us to be clear about what our faith, our religion means to us, and to think through how we live that out, how we convey that to the people around us who might just hear one snippet of information, "I went to church on Sunday," and connect that with, "Oh, you're religious," and all the things that might come with that in their head. My faith is so important to me. And so I want the world to know that I believe real life comes from placing your hope in Jesus. And so when people know that I'm a Christian, I don't want them to think of a freezing chapel with uncomfortable pews where you have to be silent. I don't want them to think of my life as restricted or limited or lacking. I don't want them to think of rules or rituals or confusing language or impossible to meet expectations. If that's what you mean when you ask me if I'm religious, then no, I'm not. When people know that I'm a Christian, I want them to know that I have found hope and strength and comfort and joy and peace. I want them to know that I have found real life, the kind of abundant life that God intends for his people. I want them to know that God speaks incredible promises over us. Promises to be with us, to be for us, to lead us and to guide us, to help us, to bless us. I want them to know that my life is better with Jesus than without him. I want them to know that he enables me to flourish. I want them to know that the core of his teaching is love, his love for us, and therefore our love for him and for others around us. I want them to know that his commands exist to protect us and enable us, his children, to thrive. I want them to know I am never alone because God is near to me. That I know that when I pray, he hears me. I want them to know that I have found freedom and blessing in relationship with God. And because of all of that, I try to live my life in a way that honors and glorifies him. I don't always get it right, but because of all that he has given me first, I choose to give all of me in return, knowing that I belong to him and that he has good purpose for my life. If that's what you mean when you ask me if I'm religious, then yes, absolutely I am. But as well as all of that, I also want them to know that this is real. I want them to know that it's solid, that it actually stacks up in real, actual life. Because life is sometimes hard, isn't it? Life is sometimes really difficult. Difficult stuff happens to me, to you, to people that we care about. I see the same stuff on the news that they do. I experience things in my own life that I'd rather not be facing. I mess up, I get frustrated, I get upset. I see things happening and can't imagine why God wouldn't have stopped them. I have plenty of doubts and questions. And I think that side of things is often part of the reason that people opt out and say, oh, I'm not really religious. And yet for me in those moments, I choose to cling tightly to my faith and to trust that everything I've said remains true. Because I know that I can't do life on my own, in my own strength, and I don't want to. For me, the only way to get through those harsh realities of life is to know that God is walking with me through it all. We all know that life is not always easy, but without God in the picture, there's also no hope and no purpose. But I believe there is always hope when we're walking with the creator of the universe by our side. And so that's what I want to say to anyone who isn't really religious. Whether we call it faith or religion or something else, at the heart of it is a relationship with God through Jesus by the Spirit, which is the source of all life and light and hope. And if you haven't experienced that for yourself, then my prayer is that you will. And if you want to chat to me or someone else about it this morning, then please do. And if you do know the life and hope that comes from knowing Jesus, then my prayer for you is that you will experience it and enjoy it afresh this week, whatever you might be going through.